The conversation around KATSEYE and diversity has been simmering since Dream Academy, especially when people first reacted to how American-leaning the lineup felt. Lara, Daniela, Sophia, and by extension Megan immediately sparked criticism because global began to look suspiciously similar to how K-pop companies often use the word, global meaning Western market friendly. That tension never really went away, it just evolved. A big issue here is that diversity and representation are being conflated when they are not the same thing. Diversity, at its most basic level, is about the presence of difference, a mix of races, ethnicities, nationalities, or backgrounds. Representation, on the other hand, is about meaning, how those people are portrayed, empowered, and allowed to exist without being diluted, stereotyped, or filtered through dominant beauty standards. Diversity asks who is in the room. Representation asks what they're allowed to be once they're there. By that definition, KATSEYE is diverse, but they are not necessarily representative in a way that feels meaningful to many people of color. And that disconnect explains why so many people don't feel seen by them, even while acknowledging that the group checks the diversity box on paper. Mana is a good example of how complicated this becomes. The criticism isn't and shouldn't be about her being not black enough or being accused of whiteness. That framing is both inaccurate and unfair. Ma Non has almost certainly experienced anti-blackness in ways that are deeply familiar to black people, especially when you look at how certain fans treat her. The issue isn't her identity. It's the role she occupies within a system that favors palatability. She fits into an image that Western media is already comfortable with. That doesn't negate her blackness, but it does affect how she is received, marketed, and protected. This pattern isn't new. We see it everywhere. Asian-led shows that sand down Asianness to make it digestible for Western audiences. Mixed or biracial actors being cast as stand-ins for entire racial groups while people who fall outside narrow beauty standards remain invisible. Bollywood favoring lighter-skinned actresses over darker-skinned ones. The message is consistent across industries. Difference is welcome, but only when it doesn't disrupt established norms. So, when a global girl group is presented as diverse and representative, yet no one in the lineup truly challenges those norms, whether in skin tone, features, or cultural expression, it's understandable that people feel disconnected. Representation loses its weight when everyone included is already industry approved. And to be clear, this isn't about blaming the girls themselves. It's about the structure selecting which versions of marginalized identities are allowed to succeed. Lara stands out precisely because she feels like the least filtered by that process. She doesn't feel molded to be palatable in the same way. Meanwhile, Daniela's experience highlights another uncomfortable truth. White-passing Latinas are often read as simply white, regardless of their actual ethnicity. It can feel harsh or even racist to say that, but it comes from a long history of cultural erasure. When so many people have had their identities stripped of visibility, they are understandably resistant to seeing white-passing individuals framed as the face of inclusivity or global representation. This is why KATSEYE feels, to many, like another example of diversity prioritized on paper rather than in practice. The industry rewards groups that are easier to consume visually and culturally, while groups with stronger Black representation or darker-skinned members, often with equal or better music, are overlooked. People like to attribute KATSEYE'S success to choreography, dance skills, or personality, and those things do matter. But it's naive to ignore how much success is also shaped by who the industry deems comfortable to look at and market. When darker-skinned Filipinas or Black girls who are not white-passing debut and don't receive the same level of success, it becomes harder to pretend this is just about talent or effort. The difference isn't ability, it's acceptability. KATSEYE benefits from a system that favors surface-level diversity without challenging its own biases. This conversation isn't an attack on the members. It's a critique of an industry that continues to confuse visibility with equity and inclusion with comfort. Until representation moves beyond palatability and allows marginalized people to exist fully without dilution, groups like KATSEYE will continue to be labeled diverse while leaving many people feeling unseen. And let's talk about the conversation around Daniela because it is genuinely strange, and a lot of it comes from people mixing up concepts they don't actually understand, and then weaponizing that confusion. I'll be reacting to some TikToks. Do not harass any creators.
Daniela didn't act Latina until people started hyping her up. Know what? I agree. During the Touch era, nobody minded her. Latina background, including her. She just looked like a regular all-white girl. Now all of a sudden she's a Latina mommy, and she gets curly extensions, and is noticeably tanner. This was her Touch era compared to now. As you can see, she didn't give a shit about representing Latina culture until getting called a Latina mommy. And yes, I know white Latinas exist. But when she tried changing herself to look like the stereotypical Latina, I knew something was up. Then Gabriela comes out and all of the sudden she's fully speaking Spanish because her whole identity is dependent on this Latina thing. Then she turned around and told us she was Italian and German. Choose one, girl.
Mind you, Daniela has been openly Latina since Dream Academy. She's been speaking Spanish since debut too. This is not something that suddenly started because people hyped her up. From the very beginning, Daniela has talked about her Latin background. There was literally an entire segment in the documentary about how she was labeled as American and how she felt about that, and she's continued to speak on her identity all the way through debut. Even when she was blonde, she still spoke about her Latin roots. So trying to change history just to talk trash is honestly pathetic. As for the whole changing her appearance argument, maybe she was worried about her hair health. And yes, maybe becoming more open about her culture made her feel more comfortable in her own skin. That doesn't make her a liar or a fraud. It means she went through something most people go through at some point, learning to accept themselves more fully over time. I'm convinced some of you just refuse to use your brain. The only point that could even be debated is the tanning, and even then, that could easily have been influenced by the company wanting a certain image at that time. And let's be real, it's not even just Daniela who looks different now. All of them do. That's what happens in an industry where image, styling, and branding constantly evolve. You guys are so weird about this, which is why I decided to address every side conversation around her. Her identity does not depend on your opinions or narratives. Her identity is Latina, and being mixed is a real thing. You can be Latina and mixed with other backgrounds at the same time. It's called being multiracial. The whole white girl framing, especially when used as an insult, already tells you this isn't a good faith discussion. With Daniela in particular, it's even more ironic because during Dream Academy, she was criticized for the exact opposite reason. People didn't think she was Latina enough. Now suddenly she's being framed as a white woman who's allegedly lying about her identity. That whiplash alone should make people stop and think. If the narrative flips this easily, maybe the problem isn't Daniela. It's the audience projecting their own rigid ideas of what Hispanics are supposed to look like. Let's start with the basics that seem to be missing from this discourse. Venezuelan and Cuban are ethnic national identities, not races. Latin America is multiracial. There are Black Venezuelans, Indigenous Venezuelans, mixed-race Venezuelans, Asian Venezuelans, and yes, white Venezuelans and white Cubans. Because race and ethnicity are different. Race is a social classification, not a biological fact, based largely on physical traits, skin color, facial features. Categories change across time and place. How someone is racialized often depends on perception, not ancestry. Race is about how societies group people, not what someone is biologically. Ethnicity refers to shared culture, not appearance. Cultural traditions, language, history, shared ancestry. Ethnicity is about cultural belonging and heritage, Latino, Hispanic, Korean, Arab. People of the same ethnicity can be different races, and people of the same race can have different ethnicities. That's not controversial, and it's not an insult. Daniela being white would not make her any less Venezuelan or Cuban, and it absolutely would not make her less cultured. Culture is not determined by skin tone. What's especially uncomfortable is how white is being used as a moral or personal accusation rather than a neutral racial descriptor. People aren't just saying she might be white, they're saying it as if it discredits her ethnicity, her experiences, or her right to claim her background. That's not how identity works. Being white does not erase your culture, your upbringing, your language, your family history, or your connection to where you're from. Treating it like a gotcha is intellectually lazy at best and xenophobic at worst. The way people have latched onto her comment about losing herself in high school is another example of deeply unserious analysis.
I lost myself in high school. It's because I was trying to please everybody. Once all those people were gone and I was in a new environment with new girls, that's when I was like, okay, like I can be me, I can be myself.
Framing that as race swapping or proof of dishonesty is not only weird, it's tone deaf. Daniela is American, based on everything we know publicly. Growing up as someone who is perceived as different in a relatively homogenous environment often means adapting yourself to survive socially. That's not deception. That's reality for a lot of people. When you're surrounded by people who don't look like you, don't share your background, or make you feel othered, of course you're going to try to blend in. Then contrast that with being placed in a genuinely diverse environment, like the one she later found herself in, where difference isn't punished. Suddenly, you're not the odd one out. You're not constantly being read as other. You're allowed to exist without explanation. Of course, that's where confidence grows. Of course, that's where self-expression becomes easier. Acting like that's something to mock or side-eye says more about the people criticizing her than about Daniela herself. And the fixation on her hair, blonde, straight, whatever iteration people want to nitpick, is just another layer of absurdity. Hair is not a racial barcode. Latin people can have blonde hair. Latin people can straighten their hair. Latin people can dye it, curl it, cut it, change it, experiment with it. None of that invalidates ethnicity. None of that is evidence of pretending to be something else. If anything, this obsession exposes how narrow and stereotypical people's idea of Hispanic people really is. The "did you fail school or do you just abandon basic thinking" question is honestly fair here. Daniela can be German, Italian, Spanish, or any combination of European ancestries and still be Latina. Latin America has centuries of European immigration. This is not new information. The insistence on reducing Latin identity to a single look, usually brown, vaguely indigenous, and aesthetically palatable to outsiders, is exactly the problem. It turns a complex, diverse set of cultures into a costume that people feel entitled to police. At the end of the day, this discourse isn't about protecting representation or having nuanced conversations about race. It's about control. It's about fans and antis alike deciding they get to define someone else's identity based on vibes, visuals, and whatever narrative suits them at the moment. Daniela's popularity increasing just made her a bigger target for that projection. That's why the conversation came back. Not because new information emerged, but because visibility invites scrutiny, especially toward women. If people actually cared about understanding race, ethnicity, and culture, they'd stop using white as a slur, stop flattening Hispanic people into a stereotype, and stop pretending personal growth and increased confidence are signs of dishonesty. What's weird isn't Daniela's identity. What's weird is how desperate people are to invalidate it. The way you guys try to reduce Daniela and Manon to white girls just proves that you're the issue, not them. With the whole over-dancing conversation, what's interesting to me is that I'm not actually saying she is or isn't over-dancing. I think there's more nuance here than a simple yes or no answer. There's a lot more to discuss and explore than just slapping a label on her performance. First, let's define the term, because overdancing is a real concept in performance critique. Overdancing refers to a style where a dancer uses excessive energy, exaggerated motions, or unnecessary flair in a way that makes them stand out from the group and disrupts synchronization. It can lead to a loss of control, making the choreography look messy, frantic, or disjointed compared to the intended, more refined or unified movement of the group. Now, the constant comparison to Ayon, usually pushed by Mons Tiez, who always seem to insert themselves into every discussion, feels unnecessary. Ayon is a unique dancer. She clearly tries to incorporate her own style and play with dynamics, but sometimes that comes at the cost of detail and consistency. When she pushes too hard, her technique can slip and things can look messy or unpolished. Daniela, on the other hand, is generally able to maintain her technique even while adding power and intensity to her movements. That's an important difference. Where I do think there's a fair point to be made, though, is about group balance. Ayon is often told to match her group, while Daniela doesn't always get that same criticism. Even if Daniela doesn't throw off the group's timing or structure the way Ayon sometimes does, she still stands out in a similar way. At times, that presence can feel overbearing, almost like she's trying to outdance the others rather than blend with them. So, While I don't personally think Daniela is overdancing in a technical sense, I do think there's room for her to match the group more evenly. In a group performance, it's not just about individual skill or power, it's also about cohesion, balance, and making sure everyone looks like they're part of the same picture, not competing for the spotlight. That aside, her facial expressions have been a little past lately, and fans using the whole, but she does better than X argument, no offense, but I genuinely don't care. Being better than someone else is not a good defense, and it's not the gag people think it is. You can still be bad, or at least lacking, even if you're better than someone else. She went from going viral for her facials to, in my opinion, overdoing them. That's not shade, it's just a preference. I don't need to see your tonsils while you're performing. Again, that's personal taste, not a character attack. But beyond performance critique, this conversation has started drifting into really weird territory, especially when it comes to Daniela's ethnicity. At that point, it stops being about dancing, stage presence, or facials, and starts becoming about policing someone's identity, which is a completely different and unnecessary line to cross. Now let's move on to the Grammys. Olivia Dean won over KATSEYE, and Icons took it with grace, right? Right? LMAO, yeah. No, the grace left the building immediately. The moment I saw who even is she, I knew exactly what time it was. Icons went straight into bitterness mode and didn't even try to hide it. First of all, the Grammys have never been a popularity contest, and anyone pretending otherwise is either new here or willfully ignorant. If popularity were the deciding factor, BTS would already have multiple Grammys sitting on a shelf, and the Academy wouldn't have the long, embarrassing history it does of snubbing massively influential artists. Ariana Grande has only won twice, and neither time was even for her own solo work. The Weeknd got 0 nominations one year despite After Hours. Beyoncé lost AOTY repeatedly, so she's not popular is not the read they think it is. It's just proof they don't understand the institution they're mad at. And honestly, who is she? Is such a weak drag when a lot of the people saying it very clearly do know who Olivia Dean is. If you can insult her music, you know who she is. They just don't listen to music outside of their bubble. That's not a flex. That's just limited taste. Let's be real for a second. KATSEYE has not done anything remotely Grammy-worthy yet. And that's not hate, that's just reality. Their discography is small, safe, and polished to the point of being sterile. Catchy? Sure. Listenable? Sometimes. Award-level artistry? No. Acting like their music is anything more than decent background pop is delusion. If someone calls me bitter for saying that, it's projection. They're the ones spiraling because their fave didn't win. Olivia Dean didn't win because she's the biggest or the loudest. She won because her music has craft, intent, and soul. Is her work perfect? No. But none of the nominees had a flawless body of work. What she does have is musicality and depth that KATSEYE simply does not have yet. And just because her music isn't gang gang, let's jump in unison, doesn't mean it's undeserving. Some of y'all genuinely hear anything that isn't hyper-processed pop and immediately label it boring. That's a you problem. And Olivia Dean has 7 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 while KATSEYE doesn't. This just highlights the gap between actual chart performance and the way some fans frame deserving recognition. Looking at this through they deserved it because of what they went through, lens doesn't really hold up. Struggle alone isn't a qualification for awards. Everyone in this industry works hard for what they want, and life, especially in entertainment, it is rarely comfortable, fair, or gentle. It's not all rainbows and sunshine, and it was never meant to be. If effort and hardship were the standard for winning, then the Grammys wouldn't be about music, artistry, or impact. They'd be about personal backstories. And while those stories can be meaningful, they aren't a replacement for the actual criteria these awards are supposed to reflect. You don't earn a trophy simply for having a difficult journey. You earn it for the work you put out into the world and how it resonates within the industry and with the public. Saying KATSEYE deserved an award over everyone else because they went through a tough time ignores the reality that there are countless artists in the music industry who face just as much, if not more, adversity. Many of them never get the benefit of a loud, protective fan base to frame their struggles as entitlement to recognition. And if we really want to follow that logic to its extreme, then almost anyone with a tragic or difficult backstory should be in line for a Grammy. By that standard, You could argue that Alex Warren, given what he's been through, should be winning awards across the board, but that's not how this works, and it shouldn't be. This isn't about tearing KATSEYE down, it's about pushing back on the idea that suffering automatically translates into superiority or special treatment. Recognition should come from growth, output, and impact, not from fans turning hardship into a moral claim over the industry. At some point, this kind of defense stops being supportive and starts becoming entitled. And honestly, that energy doesn't make the group look better. It just makes the conversation more exhausting. Now, the performance, I don't even want to be mean, but let's call it what it was. Shaky, as usual. And honestly, that part I expected. Their choreography is intense, and they're still rookies. Fine. The performance was bad, and I didn't like it, but I'll leave it at that. I have a lot more to say, and I don't want to drag this out. So, the song choice? That's where things get wild. Gang Gang, at the Grammys, during Black History Month, in front of literal musical legends. I'm sorry, but that decision needs to be studied. You're telling me they had options. Gabriela, a song that actually has relevance, and features Daniela, a Latina, on a stage that supposedly values global artistry, and they said, no, let's do this. And wasn't Gabriela the song they were nominated for? Because if so, the choice becomes even more baffling, and don't even get me started on the dance break. Manon said they can do a lot with little time, and I believe her, but why is it always the same a lot? The same structure, the same climax, the same break we've already seen repackaged again and again. At some point, it stops feeling efficient and starts feeling lazy. This is why people keep saying KATSEYE feels like a watered-down version of K-pop, because groups like Ellie Seraphim would never recycle a performance like that on a stage this important. ISNA wouldn't. Blackpink wouldn't. Even Sabrina Carpenter, who operates in the same Western pop space, changed her melody and reworked her performance. That's what respect for the stage looks like. So I'm genuinely confused about how Hybe looked at the Grammys and said, yes, let's do gnarly. Let's do nothing new. Let's not elevate the music or the performance in any meaningful way. It's almost impressive how lackluster it was. But then again, it's Hybe. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised. At the end of the day, this whole meltdown from icons just exposes the same issue we've been talking about. Entitlement without substance. Wanting accolades before the artistry is there, confusing visibility with merit, and attacking another artist, especially a Black British woman making thoughtful music because your fave didn't win. That's not loyalty. That's insecurity. Stay mad if you want, but Olivia Dean won because she earned it. KATSEYE didn't lose anything. They just weren't ready, and pretending otherwise won't change that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.